I like to talk about backs altogether, back bodices. So I'm going to be skipping around a little bit. This is page 96 if you have the black and white and brown covered international edition. It's page 86 in my spiral bound book. And it's showing how to move a dart from the shoulder to the neck area. And it says to cross mark 3 inches down on a line from the neck, so come down 3 inches. We're going to be using 1.5 inches for half scale when we do that. And they're just choosing a random place to put this. But when I talk about princess lines and I'm creating a basic pattern for a princess line, I always make sure that I have a nice smooth blending from one dart end to the other so that they're aiming at each other and you get a smooth look from one point to the other, whether they're sewn as darts or princess lines. So when I choose where I'm going to put this dart, I'm not just thinking about, well, I can scoot it over. I'm going to choose a place that's going to blend in with my back dart. So somewhere in this area, I'm going to start from where my dart ends and choose a place that's actually aiming at that dart again. So right there is going to be okay. How far can I move that and have it look? So either of those places are going to be fine. I've got a range there, but the important thing is that the end of the dart is aiming, the end of the shoulder dart that controls above this line is aiming at the waist dart that controls below that line. So as you drape this basic pattern to come up with it, your back is different from the front in that the front all rotates around a single bust point because there's only one widest point of the bust. So we've got one widest and it all rotates around that circle. On the back, we've got a widest point that works from the end of that dart, which really identifies where the bottom of your shoulder blade is. If you feel your back or you look at skeletal structure, you've got your scapula running from here to here. And the one end of the bone is the top of the dart, and the other end of the bone is the bottom of the dart. And when you're draping this, there's really no darting across the middle because you pretty much stay that same space across there. So in the book it says to measure down 1.5 inches. And I will mark that line on here. I'm keeping it perpendicular to my center back. At least I'm trying to do that, but I'm having a hard time seeing the line. So from here to here is our scapula and our dart ends. And this dart can be extended a little bit. It's really going to depend on your bone structure, what's going to work the best. So in this case, I've got it 1/4 of an inch above that. So these two darts are going to end at that same level because it's aiming at the same bone. Well, not two, there's only one there, and I think I'm going to go with the one closer to the inside of the neck. Just erase that extra line. In the book, it shows just drawing a slash point and moving it over there. And I'll do something similar to that, but I've already made my basic pattern and I know what the bone structure is like on the dress form. Well, the theoretical bone structure. It's kind of mushy, but I know where it's going to look the best because I draped the pattern. So I'm going to approach this a little bit differently than they're doing in the book. They're doing their best guess, and they're measuring down and drawing over, and they're going to slash from here and slash from there and rotate that close. And I'm going to do something really similar, but I'm going to open it up on this line that I arrived at by making the two darts aiming at each other. So I'm going to go ahead and trace this onto another piece of paper. And I know that typically my center back isn't going to be on the fold, it's going to be cut too. This one I'm going to go ahead and have be on the fold. So I'm just going to put it up against the edge of the paper. And this time we're working the opposite. My front faces to the right and my back faces to the left. And I like to leave them that way because it helps your brain think about the fact that you're looking at these two pieces where they're joining, and you keep that together. You're never going to be comparing the center front to the center back other than keeping them parallel because they don't sew to each other. So I like to keep the two sections that sew to each other together. This way I can flip them over and see if they match, and they do. They will sew together really nicely. And if you've got them both going the same way, you certainly can do that as long as it makes sense in your head. But this is what makes sense to me, so that's why they're opposite. When I draped this, I draped the left side on both sides. So this is the left of the front and the right side of the right side of the front and the right side of the back. So they're a matching set. So I'm going to trace off what I have. I'm going to put a little mark right there so I can see where I'm aiming. And my original dart. So I cannot take this top dart and rotate it around and combine it with the bottom one. It won't fit. It will give me kind of a bulgy bust area in back where I don't want it. Unless I'm trying to have a bust line in back as well as the front, and that just won't look like a regular human. Okay. So I'll just put that thought process back on there. I don't want the line to look really curvy, I just want the two aiming at each other. And that gives me an idea of where they aim at each other. So I'll just put this back on. Nope. So the thought process that's happening right now is the flattest way to combine those two lines together. And learning how to use the curve, you'll try it one way and then the other, so it takes a little bit. That one's not my favorite curve though. My favorite one is this one. And I think this one's going to give me a little bit flatter line right here, and that's what I want. We'll find out, won't we? Yeah, I can blend that a little bit differently right there, but you know, that's such a tiny bit. But I would want to blend this line into this one and this line into the outer one. And this one hasn't happened yet. So if I measure down that 1.5 inches from the center back neck, I'm lining it up on a parallel line right here, measuring down 1.5 inches and drawing a straight line over. And I'll just put on another one that goes with the top of that waist dart. So if I take this line from the dart and extend it over, I can cut straight down to this and down this line and stop, and at some point I could divide this in half and cut over to here and cut over to there and stop right in between the two, and I think that's where I'll start with this. So all we're doing is moving the dart into the neck, and you can follow the book exactly if that makes you happier. So I'm cutting down where I want to put my new dart, and my new dart doesn't have to be curved. I'll straighten that out when I finish with this part. So I've cut kind of halfway in between the two, and I'm just following the trajectory of the dart that's taking me furthest over to that point. And then I divided that in half. So now it's moving, a little loose tooth. So I'll zoom in. Alright, so I've cut where that little spot is circled, and this can go either way. So I'm going to pick this up and slide that under and let it pivot from right there and close that. And then I would just redraw that line, and the dart's going to be over here, and it's not matching up exactly. So I'm going to experiment a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and separate it. You don't have to do this. But would that close better if I did it from this corner instead? It is closer. But then what would it do on the other side? Not closer. So if I'm wanting to try coming from this corner, when I pivot that, oh, not holding still, then I get this big discrepancy over here. So if I want to split the difference, and I'll come back to the book page, they're cutting down and over, and you can see how this one's not lining up either. So they're just redrawing the shoulder. So we're expecting some of that to happen. We just end up moving the extra ease that we've got to a different place. So that's why I kind of split the difference by rotating it halfway between the two, kind of getting the average. So I'm going to go ahead and glue that together. And you want to keep it connected so it retains the integrity of the piece. I mean, I could move this out and do that, but look at how much bigger that gets. So I want to keep it connected, and when I get that glued together, I'll just redraw my straight line, and then I'll correct that when I'll correct this after I'm through with that part. So where's my glue? I'm going to line this up so that's still touching where I drew the line. And then I'll just rotate the paper around and glue that down right where that belongs. And if you learn from my mistakes, it will be better to wait for the glue to dry before you try and erase. Okay, so I'll fill this back in, and then I'll fold that dart shut. And I think I heard you say you want that in color because it's easier to see. So I will glue in a pink one. I find it easier to turn it over and put it on the back, and maybe some of these things you hear too many times, but yep, that worked. Except I want to make sure it's nice and flat. So I put that in there, it's flat, and I will zoom back out because there we go. We could be a little closer. All right. So when this is dry, I obviously have pencil all over my fingers. There we go. And I should have waited for that to dry. So if you want it to look nice and neat, don't try to use your eraser while the glue is still wet. Okay. So turning it back right side up. In order to fix what I did here, I want to keep my corner to corner the same because I closed that. This shoulder width is still going to be the same distance, which means it will still sew nicely into the front because it's the same distance. And we want to fold this side, and the original dart ended at this level right here. So typically I would end that dart at the same level, even though it's further over here. So I'm going to go ahead and fold. Make sure it's a straight line. Yes, that's a straight line. So we'll fold this side of it because it's going toward the center. Lay it on the table, roll it over, find that edge. It's closest to the center back. Bring it to the point, crease it sharply all the way out to the edge. Push down, and then the paper cups. And then you can mash the center of your dart and it comes together nicely. So you can see where this is the same thing in the opposite direction as the other one. So we've got our ease back, and we want to blend from about here to here and kind of have it be the same curve. So I'm just going to split the difference, and it would work out a lot nicer if I would use my curve. Sometimes if it's just a tiny space, you can get away with that, but your best habit is going to be to just use your curve every time. So I'll add seam allowance to that. And cut it while it's folded. there's my dart shape. It's got a little point. See that little tiny point? So I moved it from the shoulder to the neck. You can move it into the... These are not quite as forgiving as on the front, because you're really aiming at the bone right here, and the further away you get from the bone, it doesn't fit as well. I mean, if I even come over with this and I put my princess line coming further over here, you know, that will work. Or if I make it more of a gradual line, just the further away I get from that circle, it's not going to fit as well. You can still come over here, but you want that point to stay as close to that as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this one too. Fold it to the closest side. Put your finger down, bring the one side to match the other. And I seem to have gotten a bubble in the paper right there, so I'm going to kind of push that out with my ruler. There we go. Okay, so now I'm just mashing down the center from the top. And if I add my seam allowance, I can go ahead and cut it off. And this one will be finished, and that will be a back neck dart. But the waist dart isn't changing. And this one will be cut one on the fold. But that would mean if you used this in connection with a front piece, the front would have to be open. Either the front or the back has to open. So if you decide to use this with something, and you want your front to be on the fold, then you'll need to add seam allowance down the center of the back. And I usually like to use a 1/2 inch on these little half scale ones because it's easier to alter if you need to. So I'll cut that while it's folded. Oh, there I go, cutting backwards. Back shoulder dart, back bodice, cut one on fold, size 8. So this one, if this one were on the fold, then you'd be opening down the front like a blouse or something. Students sometimes try to open them down the side seam, and you do see that happen occasionally, but not very often. Center back, fold. then color the seam allowance. So I'll just turn it sideways. Fills the whole picture.